Good morning, dear students. Welcome to P.N.AMERSEY e-learning classes. Chapter number 11, Non-Violence and Love. For a non-violence person, the world is like a big family where no one fears anyone nor anyone tries to frighten anyone. The root cause of fear is violence. Jesus Christ was against violence. So was Leo Tolstoy. Gandhiji never approved of violence. So did many sages and saints the world over at various junctures of time. Gautam Buddha, Guru Nanak, King Ashoka also fall in the same category according to Gandhiji. One could win over violence by non-violence. There was no better way to stop the onslaughts of violence than by non-violence. जीसस क्राइस्ट, लियो टॉलस्टाई, ये सब जो भी थे वो हिंसा के विरुद्ध थे। गांधी जी ने भी कभी हिंसा का साथ नहीं दिया। काफ़ी संत और साधु पूरी दुनिया से इस लड़ाई में जुट गए। गौतम बुद्धा, गुरु नानक, किंग अशोका, इन सब ने भी हिंसा का विरोध किया। गांधी जी की सोच थी कि हिंसा पर जीत अहिंसा से ही हो सकती है। नॉन वायलेंस इज नॉट अ वेपन ऑफ द कॉवर्ड। वन नीड्स टू बी ब्रेव टू प्रैक्टिस नॉन वायलेंस। In our freedom struggle, Gandhiji led the nation to freedom by non-violent means. When the protesters burned the police post in Chora Chori, Gandhiji called a halt to the protest simply because he thought it wrong to end violence using the violence. Non-violence is much superior to violence. Just as the one who swims along the tide of water is not a swimmer, but the one who swims against the current of water is. Similarly, the one who practices violence in return for violence is not a believer of non violence, but one who sticks to non violence in the face of violence is. आज़ादी की लड़ाई में गांधी जी चाहते थे कि आज़ादी हमें अहिंसा से मिले। जब प्रोटेस्टर्स ने पुलिस पोस्ट को जला दिया था, तब गांधी जी ने उन्हें रुकवा कर कहा था कि अहिंसा ही। आज़ादी की लड़ाई में गांधी जी चाहते थे कि आज़ादी अहिंसा से मिले। जब प्रोटेस्टर्स ने पुलिस पोस्ट को जला दिया, उस समय गांधी जी ने उन्हें रुकवा कर ये कहा कि हिंसा की लड़ाई से जीतना ये गलत है। अहिंसा ही सबसे सर्वश्रेष्ठ है। A non-violent person knows no fear of violence, nor does he makes other fear him. One who uses the weapon of non-violence succeeds only when he was unwavering faith in God. The mightiest of all violence is less mighty than the truth non-violence. Patience is the mantra for non-violence. All religions have one thing in common, and that is non-violence. Violence is the weapon of the weak, whereas non-violence is the weapon of the brave. When you resort to non-violence to end violence, the sheer quality of non-violence takes shape and in the process exposes the brute traits of violence. Non-violence is a practical way of living and not merely a bookish concept. It has truth on its side, whereas violence has falsehood as its guide. Non-violence never ends in defeat. It defeats violence in the end. एक अहिंसावादी इंसान कभी हिंसा से नहीं डरता और ना ही किसी को डराता है। अहिंसा को एक अहिंसा कोई किताब में लिखी गई चीज़ नहीं है। इसे हम जीवन में आधारित होने वाली घटनाओं पर ही हम सीख सकते हैं। अहिंसा एक सच्चाई है, जबकि हिंसा का कोई सच्चाई नहीं है। नॉन वायलेंस नेवर एंड्स इन डिफीट। अहिंसा का कोई अंत नहीं है, पर हिंसा को हम खत्म कर सकते हैं। For non-violence to be true, it must not be a make-believe one. Non-violence gets impetus by the severity of violence. Its practitioner can consistently pursue it despite all odds, and its antagonist cannot survive the sallies of non-violence in the long run. Non-violence is as much needed to preserve independence as it was needed to achieve it. अहिंसा जो है वो कभी प्रोत्साहन नहीं देता है हिंसा को, और साथ ही में कहा गया है कि शत्रु जो होते हैं वो ज़्यादा समय तक नहीं रह सकते। तब गांधी जी ने कहा है कि आज़ादी तो हासिल ही करेंगे। One cannot apply non-violence on a large scale for bigger issues if one has not tested it at personal level for tribal matters as a testing laboratory. Love is another name for non-violence. It turns a sworn enemy into the best friend, and it heals many wounds like a balm. In the absence of truth and non-violence, the march of violence will be unhindered to cause the end of mankind. One must always win over the forces of evil with the forces of good, and that's possible only if we curse the sin and spare the sinner. Just as in geometry, perpendicular is the shortest of all lines drawn from a point to a given line. Non-violence is the only shortest and surest route to end violence. Religion and non-violence form the staple food of saints and preachers of all times. Mahatma Gandhi was willing to give up anything for the sake of his country other than non-violence, truth, and love. धर्म और अहिंसा ही एकमात्र ऐसा रास्ता है जिससे हम हिंसा पर जीत पा सकते हैं। महात्मा गांधी कुछ भी कर सकते थे आज़ादी के लिए, लेकिन अहिंसा और प्यार और सच्चाई के रास्ते को अपनाकर His, his non-violence didn't ascribe to shirking away from the responsibility of protecting the hungry masses from the rich few. No one should remain a mute spectator and protagonist of non-violence in the face of social injustice, violence on the poor and the weak anywhere in the world. इस लेसन से हमें यही समझ में आता है कि अहिंसावादी इंसान की दुनिया सबसे बड़ी होती है, जहाँ पर ना उसे किसी का डर होता है, ना ही किसी से वो डरता है और ना किसी को डराता है। Thank you, dear students.